Hey everyone, welcome to another special review episode of The Geek.
Hey, one day we're gonna be able to sync that up.
Is it me? I don't know. But anyway,
It's
we're trying.
easier. It's
Yeah?
way easier to do in person, to be fair.
Yeah,
We're all
that's fair,
making
that's fair.
sacrifices during this very difficult time. One of those sacrifices is we cannot do this in sync.
That's
Fine.
true. It's part of the Zadvash, from what I understand. So there
We can do it this way. Maybe we have to
nerd
do it like
reference.
this way. Like we'll do like you do Rocha the, I'll do Geek,
Yeah.
and you do Buddies. Like, ladies and gentlemen,
Oh.
welcome to
The
Geek.
Buddies.
It needs work. We'll workshop it.
Hey! Oh, I see.
We're gonna workshop it. We're gonna workshop it.
I think
the A that's the problem. I know, yeah.
I think there's a delay on Mike's side because it sounded perfect to me.
Well, that's because he's got those cordless ones that they're not the high-end cordless ones like the ones I have. So I understand though. So the sync is not going to be 100% correct. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I said that shit. Put it in the calendar. I said that shit. Anyway, today we are back reviewing, as we've done all the season of Picard, reviewing 2 episodes at a time. We just had 2 of the most incredible episodes of the season. In my opinion, one chock full of information and one chock full of nostalgia. Episode 7, Nepenthe, and episode 8, Broken Pieces. And so we're going to review and break them all down for you here, Geek Buddies style, on this show. And I'm looking forward to it. Once again, for those of you who don't know, I am John Rocha.
I am Michael Vogel.
And this is Shannon McClung.
Right, and we've all been on the Geek Buddies talking about nerd stuff for the last few months. If this is your first time experiencing us, thank you so much for clicking on this review. We're going to do our best to break this thing down. I think we should start, obviously, with episode 7 with Nepenthe. A lot of Star Trek Next Generation vibes all through this thing. And where is Worf? But anyway, we'll get to that later. Let's talk about this. We had Deanna Troi. We had number 1. We had Will Riker up in this thing. We had their daughter. We had the mention of their son who had passed away that was connected to what had happened in the Romulan stuff in the synth situation. Michael, overall, this episode was really heartbreaking on a number of levels. But also, once again, we get a little more of the let's beat up Picard for a little bit for an entire episode. This has been a fascinating season about how they've kind of like exposed or maybe tried to undercut a little bit of the power that we had felt for Jean-Luc Picard. What did you think?
I thought it was great. I thought that this is sort of what a lot of fans of Next Generation had been waiting for. And they delivered it like in spades. Like it was like, you got Deanna Troi, you got Will Riker, you got these great moments with them and Picard, and it felt like a bunch of old friends coming back together. And it was just beautiful. And actually, after all the action and all the craziness and all of the interpersonal turmoil of Picard's current crew, it was just nice to see these 3 people get back together. I mean, I think it was sort of like, A, it was great to see these characters, but B, it was great to see these actors sort of stepping into these roles again. Yeah. And it felt warm. It felt familiar. It felt nice. I think they were really smart to sort of save this for an episode where Picard kind of got out of danger with Soji. It's like there was a lot of stuff going on. There was a lot of things, and we needed that moment of rest. We needed that moment of comfort. So Picard going to this out of the way, very beautiful, gorgeous, woodsy planet felt comfortable. And also this was the moment for us to step back into those Next Generation shoes. Shannon, as someone who wasn't a Next Generation guy, how was it for you watching this episode?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was thinking as I was watching it, that if I were more invested in the universe, if I'd been a fan of this for 20, 30 years, watching Picard talk with Troi is her name, right?
Yeah, Deanna Troi.
Watching the 2 of them talk, watching he and Riker have that conversation out on the dock by that little pond. I got a lot of in-game vibes there when they were all kind of talking out by that little body of water. But also with the episode starting, it clarified your theory, Vogel, about Jurati being sent by it was right? Like she gave her that thing, that tracker to eat. I mean, everything.
It was a Flintstones vitamin.
That is not true. They don't have the rights to that. But the episode overall, I super enjoyed it, and I really liked that. What episode 6 ended with that cliffhanger of like, what are Elnor and Hugh gonna do? And you see Elnor basically took all those dudes out, and poor Hugh. Oh my god.
R.I.P.
Oh,
All right,
man.
thank you.
So
Yeah.
sad. But watching Eleanor be able to grab that, whatever that knife was that Narissa threw, and how he was able to chuck it back at her right as she teleported.
Yeah.
Just really.
We call it beamed in Star Trek. She beamed out.
Oh,
Beamed away.
My God.
Is what do they always say beamed, or do they, because it's called the transporter,
No,
right?
Yeah. It's called teleporter. I'm sorry. Transport room, rather. It's transport room. Yes.
Transporter.
So, yeah. So I'm sorry, Shannon, you have to deal with the nerdy Star Trek guy on the crew. Sorry about that. I mean,
does anyone else in Star Trek say "beam me up" other than Kirk?
No, it rarely
Yeah.
is. I don't think anybody out of the original series says "beam me up."
We got 7 to beam up. Like beam up, they say it all the time. They totally say it
7
all the
to
time.
beam
What are
up?
you talking- Yeah, like there'll be a
Oh,
group
okay.
like, hey, we have 4 to beam up. Like beam us up. Like that is.
Oh, okay.
They'll say,
right.
beam me up.
Do they say it at the end, Mike? I think you're right. Actually, they say it at the end, 2 to beam up. Don't they say that
Yeah.
when they leave? Yeah. So I apologize, Shannon. Do say it, but I mean, Kirk's the one that's like, he's the pioneer. So y'all can kiss it. It's my personal opinion.
But
please unblock me, William Shatner. Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, the episode was great. I really like. I mean, I really like that actor who plays Hugh, and I really like the actor who plays Eleanor as well. I think they're both doing a great job. And I did not pay closer attention to this, but did Riker at any point during the episode do his sort of step over the chair thing that he used to do in the series?
I don't think at his age he can step over a chair anymore. So I'm gonna say no. But he did. He just Will Frakes did a great job in this episode, as Will Riker. There was just sort of a joy to seeing him sort of stomp around his house and yell about pizza. That was just so counter to what we've been seeing so far. I know the planet's name is Nepenthe that they're inhabiting, but I'm just gonna call it Pizza Planet because that's really pizza was such a big part of this episode. He did a great job. The love and respect that was so evident that Riker still has for Picard was such a beautiful thing to see. And with Troy, there was a little bit more of like she's older. She's been through stuff with her son, with Dad who died, who passed away, as Johnny was talking about. And there was a little bit more of tough love for her, like, especially with Picard. Johnny kind of told what you're talking about. Like there was a little bit more of like, you're being an idiot. You need to get it together. I think one of the smartest things about this episode was the way they used Riker and Troy's daughter, Kestra, to sort of help Soji come out of her shell. They made such a big deal out of Soji sort of coming out of this situation where she had kind of fallen in love with Narek and had been totally lied to. And then she like lands with Picard, and now Picard is saying, I'm here to help you, but she doesn't know who to trust. She doesn't know what to do. Kestra tells her right away that she's an android, which is the first that she's heard. And so Soji's dealing with a whole lot. And did John just beam out of there? What happened?
No, he teleported.
I'm a little too white, so I'm just adjusting my lights. Go ahead, keep going.
All right, well, yeah.
Sorry, I was a little too white.
Excitement of live TV. John, you've been a lot of things in your life. Too white is not one of them.
Well, some people do think I was. Some people do accuse me of being white, so it's kind of funny.
No, but what I was saying is, I just think that like the way they used Kestra as sort of this very innocent child, and Soji, who in a lot of ways is kind of a child, to sort of help Soji with her sort of acceptance of being an android in a way that no adult could do. There's sort of an innocence to it. He's gone again. He's just gone. He's just gonna wander off.
I got beamed up. I'm back now. All right. Anyway, there we go. That looks better.
So at any rate, I thought that was a really great way to sort of get Soji to sort of embrace who she was in an easier way when she wasn't really in a place of trusting the adults.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you bring up, certainly. And that's what we wanted to see, because Picard at times, as we've seen throughout the season, and certainly in the series, he can be quite single-minded. And in the single-mindedness, other people's emotions or feelings or consideration kind of get lost in the mix, because he's trying to do something that's good for the overall good. But his bedside manner has never been some of the best bedside manner in Star Trek. So this idea of Soji, like Deanna having to call him out with how he's being a little bit like not disrespectful, but inconsiderate to Soji's feelings. Or what, I mean, she just found out she's an android like 30 minutes ago. So it's like, you got to give, I mean, she is still processing it. Yes, she is an android. It is a computer. So logically it processed quicker, but she's like, has had to accept so much going into this situation. I think it was brilliant actually to set it here, like to take a break, a little bit of a break, touch base with people like Riker and like Troy to kind of remind us how much we enjoyed their camaraderie. But also there's some symbolism here, which I enjoyed. Kestra is the name of Deanna Troy's sister who drowned. And Thad, their son, is the name of one of Will Riker's like ancestors who fought in the Civil War. And the planet of Nepenthe also has symbolism because it means, I'm looking up here, it's an ancient Greek word. It's a fictional medicine for sorrow, a drug of forgetfulness. So clearly
it's from
they're dealing.
it's from Homer's The Odyssey.
Right, and clearly they're dealing with the loss of Thad, their son, and it's been looming over everything. And you can see them reference him every once in a while. And even Deanna says Kestra is like getting closer to getting over it. But Deanna, as an empath, must be feeling the loss of Thad even deeper than anybody in that family, because that was always her gift on Next Generation. So I love that they added a lot more of the humanity, so for lack of a better term, throughout this episode that allowed you to kind of like take a break, take a breath and see what was going on. Still had the Eleanor stuff and all that jazz, or Eleanor stuff rather, and all that jazz, but you had enough of the humanity to kind of ground you and then get you going. And Riker is so big, and clearly on the show they were using like different levels, because Riker looked like he could slap around the old man no problem. Like it just looked like a prison situation, and I felt bad for Picard, but maybe that's on purpose too, because for the first time ever, and Michael, I don't know if you agree with this, having seen the show, and Shannon, I don't know if you have an opinion on this, but it was like it worked to their advantage to have him be so much taller than Picard, because in essence they're equals now. It feels like here's Picard running off to the stars again, but Riker has settled down. He's settled with Deanna. They had kids. Yes, there's a tragedy, but they have something of stability that Picard has never been able to find post being captain of the Enterprise. And I thought that was fascinating that it kind of leveled them out for the first time. And Picard, and the way Riker even addressed Picard, it didn't feel as if it was like, you're my boss or whatever. It was more equal, and I like that.
They're now peers.
Peers, so to speak.
Yeah. And before we move on to the next episode, I think we got to talk about the Rios, Jurati, Raffi sort of dynamic on the ship when Picard isn't there. How Rios realizes that they're being tailed by somebody, and he immediately he goes to Jurati and he's like, "Hey, I think Raffi, she might have it out for us. Like it's too weird that she went to Free Cloud and then immediately she's back." And then to watch Jurati sort of make that decision to inject herself with whatever that thing was to sort of short out the tracker. Again, really
the Flintstone vitamin.
I've never seen anyone put themselves in a coma to not be tracked. It was very interesting. Yeah.
Well, I think it was really cool because Jurati, it's an interesting thing with her character. Like, she is such a likable character who then did something that was so horrible and is kind of set up to be, you did bad things. You're a bad person. Yeah. And you really got to see in this episode sort of her struggle. Like, I really loved the way that Raffi clearly, when Jurati was freaking out and had that breakdown and was like, I just want to go home, take me home. We're not going to help anybody. We just have to get out of here. Raffi's clearly offering her drugs. Like, she's like, whatever you need to make you feel better, like, we can do this. And she's like, I need cake. Like, they really sort of stick with, like, she is this innocent person who's sort of been thrown into the situation. And once she realizes that she is still being used by Commodore O, and, I don't think she's quite, it's the next episode where everybody puts the pieces together. But as far as she knows, whoever's tracking them, she knows that it's because of what Commodore O gave her. And so doing that thing, I think in the audience's mind, at least a little bit, it sort of redeems her to a degree. Like, she clearly isn't a bad person. She is someone who had something shown to her, which we see in the next episode, which we're about to talk to, is a heavy thing. And this is the way that she dealt with it. But I do think it went a long way towards sort of redeeming her a bit in the audience's eyes. And like moved things along there. So like when we leave with Jurati's in a coma. A lot of shit is going down. And so, I think like Johnny said, like, I think this was the right time to introduce some next generation characters, to give us a breather, to give us that bit of humanity. And before we jump to the next episode, just like Johnny, to your point, I do think that this episode goes a long way towards you keep referring to it as sort of undercutting Picard or like, showing his flaws. But I think like it's just a really interesting thing to do with a character like Picard is to sort of poke on those weaknesses, poke on those other sides, because any character, no matter how heroic you make them in whatever version, like in Next Generation, as great as he was, there were these things about him. It would be great for someone to do something like this with someone like Kirk one day. Kirk sort of like doesn't have someone to like poke those holes. Like this is a whole sort of breakdown of a character to find the strength underneath once you sort of expose those weaknesses, which I think is really interesting about the show.
Yeah. I think that's a fair point. I think in the movies, though, you see Kirk constantly being caught out in the movies, like in V'ger, in Star Trek Motion Picture. He has no idea what's going on. He's always one or two steps behind this sentient thing. And in in Khan gets the best of him for the most part until the end of the movie. He almost kills his entire crew. Yeah, so Kirk has been found out many times in the past, but this has been so consistent throughout a season. You've never seen Kirk getting found out throughout a whole season as consistently as Picard is. But the reason I say this is not to bash Picard. I think Picard is such a strong character that you can do this with him and not lose the respect, and the reverence, and the heroic nature that you feel or the ability that you feel about the Picard character. So I like that. And for as much as you may find the flaws with him, he still gets shit done. So whatever his method is, it works, so that's at the end of the day.
Well, and also what I like about him is he really clearly is a man who sort of, in his mind, had sort of led his life. I mean, he says earlier in the season, he was just waiting around to die. Like he led his life, and he kind of, I think, felt like he ended on a failure. He didn't convince the Federation to help the Romulans. He then sort of abandoned the Romulans once he was told he couldn't do what he wanted to do. And this whole thing with first Daj and now Soji, I think he's seeing as a personal quest to sort of give himself purpose again. But I think what this episode did is, especially through Deanna Troi, showed him that like there is this person that is going through a whole thing right now. And I think Kestra says it the best at the end of the episode to Soji. She says, "You don't have a father, but you have Picard." And she goes, "I don't have Picard." And she says, "You could have him and he could have you. You guys could have each other." And I think that sort of is like the crux of like what's going on from an emotional standpoint through the season is there's these two people that are a little bit lost. And I think Picard is a little bit lost. And I think them finding each other is kind of really important. I think that episode kind of teed up the emotional heart of it to make way for the next episode where we got as John said, a deluge of information.
Yeah, right. I mean, I got to be honest with you. I was a bit overwhelmed by this episode 8, Broken Pieces. There was a lot to consume. Yeah, I'm a massive Star Trek fan. Massive. From the beginning, original series, grew up on that kind of stuff. But there are episodes in Next Generation or in Voyager or in any of the subsequent series that can overwhelm you with information. And I start, my nerd cred starts to go down because I'm like, I can't conceive of all of this at once. And there was a lot thrown into this episode. I was saying before we started the episode that I thought Michael should be the one that navigates us through this thing. So please, Michael, if you don't mind.
All right. Well, yes, there is a lot going on in this episode. So we get back to the La Serena, the ship, and we find out, Jurati is awake. Everyone's very disappointed in her. Picard tells her he's very disappointed, which I think is like the worst thing that could happen is Jean-Luc Picard telling you he's disappointed in you. Meanwhile, the second that Rios sees Soji, he sort of flips out and we don't really know why. Yeah. And Raffi kind of spends the episode now no longer completely wasted because she made the EMH get rid of alcohol on the ship and not serve her alcohol. Right. She kind of plays detective and kind of in a really kind of funny sequence talks to all the emergency medical holograms who are all aspects of Rios, trying to put together what's going on while he's like in his bedroom sulking and drinking. So Jurati is talking with Picard. Then Jurati talks with Soji. And we get a whole bunch with them. Like Jurati clearly at this point, no matter what she did and no matter what the Zat Vash showed her, and we'll talk about the Zat Vash in a minute, is clearly as a scientist fascinated by Soji. And you get a really good interplay between the two of them where Soji says, "Do you think I'm a person?" And that's kind of a really important moment. And then Jurati swears she's not going to hurt Soji. And Soji says, "You couldn't hurt me if you tried," which I thought was great. Kind of awesome. And what we do come to find out is that when Rios was in Starfleet, his captain, Captain Vandermeer, who he looked at as a father figure, they had these two people come on board the ship. One, a girl named Jana, who looked just like Soji, clearly a synth. And another person named Beautiful Flower, who is possibly a male synth. We don't really know. I think we're going to find out in the next episode. And Captain Vandermeer was ordered to kill them both. And Rios got so upset with him that Vandermeer ended up feeling bad and killing himself, which is why Rios is carrying this whole issue with his former captain.
Right.
So that was a ton of information. Really nice moment with Rios and Picard, where Picard said he knew Vandermeer was a good guy. I think, this is a long way going towards Rios sort of healing from what he remembered. And then we get all of them going together and talking about the things that they've figured out. And this sort of lays out everything over the course of the season that has been put together, which is, now I'll talk about what we see at the beginning of the episode. We see the Zat Vash. We see this secret Romulan sect of people who are all shown this image that is not like a future vision, but something that happened a long time ago in the past somewhere else, where there was sort of this moment where sentient life became fully formed and led down a path to like sort of epic destruction on a galactic scale. And the Zat Vash are so afraid of this. The Zat Vash are so afraid of this that they have like dedicated their life to make sure this never, ever, 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 ever happens. And so this vision is so horrifying that when you see it, most people like just die, claw their eyes out, go mad. We see Narissa seeing this vision and surviving. We also see Narissa's aunt, who is the Romulan who was assimilated by the Borg, survive but clearly go crazy.
Right.
And what we come to find out is that Narissa's aunt was on a Romulan ship that did get assimilated by the Borg. But when the Borg assimilated her, her pain about sentient life, her craziness, her madness about sentient life was so extreme that it kind of seeped through the entire collective and infected that entire Borg ship. So that Borg ship got separated by the collective, completely broke down. And that's why the Romulans have this artifact. That's how this artifact ended up coming into Romulan hands and away from the Borg. And so it was Picard, Rios, Raffi, Jurati, Soji, all put these pieces together and now know everything. They understand why the Zat Vash are so upset, how they got the Borg cube. They understand what's at stake, what's going on, and they figure out where they need to go, which is Soji's planet. And Soji then uses a Borg transwarp system, which is from Voyager. It's how the Borg can go faster than warp 10 to get to this place. And so that's kind of everything that happens there. And meanwhile, in my favorite part of the episode, on the Borg artifact, Elnor gets help from 7 of 9, who shows up like a fucking badass. And then 7 of 9 ends up hooking herself up to the Borg ship, kind of becoming queen of her own mini collective, which she's very hesitant to do because, A, she understands what it means to put these Borg back into a collective, and she understands what it means for her. We get the most epic moment where 7 of 9 says, "We are Borg." Then, even though the Romulans get rid of most of the Borg on the ship, throw them out into space, the few Borg that remain, she does use to take down Narissa. Did Narissa get out at the last minute? Did it look like she got beamed out of there? Or is Narissa like she got beamed out? But her and Elnor get control back of the Borg cube, and then Elnor, rightly a little bit nervous, asks if he's about to be assimilated. 7 of 9 detaches herself from the Borg cube, getting back, and says that Annika still has work to do, which is her human name before she became 7 of 9. So that kind of gets her out of there. And so that kind of tees everyone up. So Elnor and 7 of 9 are on the Borg cube, presumably, hopefully, heading to meet up with everybody else. Picard and his crew are headed into Soji's planet, and we see at the very end of the episode that Narek, who's still figured out where he needed to go, was waiting for them and follows them in. So we're sort of teed up for these last 2 episodes to be like, I think the cool thing about this episode, as much information as there was, is that Picard has sort of been doling out information in just little bits and pieces. There's been mysteries on mysteries, like who are the Zat Vash? What do the Zat Vash want? Why are the Zat Vash afraid? What happened with the synths on Mars? Like, there's all these questions. And this episode did a pretty good job, I think, of sort of just laying everything out on the table. So we now have all the information and we're ready to go to Soji's planet, see what's actually going on there, and get all these answers and hopefully have like a thrilling epic finale.
Well, and as you had said, Mike, with Jurati in the last episode, we find out she's not a villain. Like, she did something wrong. And that's what makes the most interesting villains are people that think that they are right. And the Zat Vash are doing what they think is right.
Yeah, one of the critiques of the show up to this episode is that Narissa has been sort of like cookie cutter, twirl your mustache, bad guy villain. And I don't know that this episode fully fixed that, but because you saw what Narissa saw, you did see a little bit of a different side of her, especially when she was talking to her aunt. You do see that she really does believe in what she's doing. Like, she believes that if you let sentient life flourish, that this is the road you're going to go down. And I really did love, along those lines, when Picard and Rios were talking, where Rios says, which is accurate, like, Soji took over their ship in a matter of seconds. Like, if she or a race of sentient beings wanted to go bad, they could. And maybe the Zat Vash are right. And Picard has that wonderfully Star Trek philosophy speech that says, you know, maybe the past was written, but the future's not written. And it's really about how we treat these people now that's going to dictate that. And we could operate through fear like the Zat Vash, or we could operate through hope. And I mean, that just ticks all my buttons. So that was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I did enjoy a lot of the moments. I mean, there was nothing more badass than seeing Seven of I hook back up again, especially because when we had seen her introduced earlier in the season, she was so much more closer to what you sensed was her before she was assimilated, right? So you got more of her humanity a couple episodes ago, 3 episodes ago. So to see her sync back up again, and then her say that line, like, I'm not
we
sure
are bored.
I'm going to want to release them. No, not that one.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm going to want to release them. That's the thing. We Are Borg was badass on its own just to watch it, but the fact that she knows this could overpower her, that's her fear, right? Which Picard and her talked about when they said, does it ever really go away? And he said no, and she said the same thing. So they've never really forgotten their experience, and much like we saw before, how the anti-Borg thing kind of permeated that ship and got it separated from the collective. The same thing, the fear of the Borg has permeated both Seven of Nine and Picard to the point where their fear overcomes the decision. But the fact that she makes that decision, I think, was the most badass thing she could have done, other than fighting and throwing people around. I think this is even more badass than anything she's done, because she's willing to sacrifice herself in the spur of the moment to try to do something here to overturn the situation. And I agree with you. I think I like that you got a little more with Narissa. You got the background. Yeah. Is she fully fleshed out as a villain? No, there's still going to be people complaining that it's not enough, but at least you got a little bit of the motivation here that you could understand. And we're in 2020 now. We need to understand villains, not just hate them. And I think it's important to understand what their motivations are. And we got that. And I thought that was essential as we round as we go into the final turn into these last 2 episodes, that we can
the final frontier, you might say. The final frontier.
Ooh, that's a movie, Shannon. No, anyway, as you go around the final turn. Yes, 5. It's terrible.
I know. I've seen that one.
Oh, you saw? There you go.
I saw that one.
I like that we're getting. Yeah, it is a bad one. I like that we're getting like all the motivations, all the layers, most of the layers, and all the complexities of these relationships and these conflicts now right on the table. So we know what's going to happen. So we know whatever happens in 9 and 10, we have this perspective to process the events. And I think that's very smart for them to do that. And overall, I mean, it was shocking, a 14-minute intro about the past, essentially exposition. And you guys write shows. God damn it. Someday I'm going to get a different fucking thing for this. But you guys write episodes for your TV shows and, animated things of that nature. But of course, both of you watch television for many, many years. You look at something like this. Did you think it was bold of them to do a 14-minute exposition intro that they could have parsed out throughout the season? Or do you think this was not a good idea? What do you guys think about it?
I thought it was a good idea. I mean, 14 minutes, that is a really, really long opening. But I think already you have so many kind of mysteries permeating throughout the first 7 episodes. I think to throw one more in sort of piecemeal, I don't think it's that gratifying once you get to like sort of the unity of everything. I think the way that they did it was great. I mean, but that 14-minute, that was a bold choice, especially considering how much information they had to give you after that, considering everything that happened with Rios, everything that happened with Soji when she met Rios. I mean, it was a lot of consolidation of story. They were very good at it.
Yeah. No, I agree with Shannon. I think it was a good idea. I think that at this point, there's been so many questions, so many things, and like you'll go along with a show for a while, wanting to get the answers and being okay not knowing. But then when you get to a point and you're like, it's like the Lost thing. It's like at some point, tell me what the fuck the smoke monster is. And this was a 14-minute, okay, we're going to tell you what the smoke monster is. And they gave you all the answers. Like it was, this is what it is. And I think particularly because I think as Rafi is putting things together later in the episode and makes these realizations that the group of 8 is not a group of 8, it's a grouping of stars. Like it was important for us to have seen that stuff visually so that we were a little bit ahead of Rafi so that we could follow along. Otherwise it would have been very, very confusing, I think.
Yeah.
Also, can we just mention one thing that was great is when Picard was on the holo phone with Admiral Clancy, the woman who heads up the Federation.
Oh yeah.
And finally, now everybody's on board, everybody gets what's happening, we're on the same page. But even with all that, she still had to tell Picard to shut the fuck up, which was really, really, really funny.
Yet another episode where he is constantly being pushed back against throughout. But again, he survives it intact. I think overall, people's feelings about him, he survives it intact, and that's a positive. I thought this. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead. There's one more moment that I want to touch on, but go ahead and what you're going to say.
The one thing I want to say is this line from Agnes when she said, "I think about suicide every day. That's how I comfort myself." That's such a bold line to put in a movie like a show like this. And I know we're way more open now about mental health issues and about suicide, and I think we have a better perspective overall in our entertainment and in our world. And I thought. But I still felt this was a very ballsy line, or gutsy line rather, to put in a show and have her speak about this. And it also helped her character because it helped us not feel as negative towards her as well. Ever since she killed Maddox, the show has worked tirelessly to redeem her a little bit and have you see that she is actually a good person. And the fact you find out the Commander O is both Romulan and Vulcan. That's very interesting. That answered my question because I didn't understand how a Vulcan can show you the future. A Vulcan can go into your mind and see your memories, but I didn't understand that a Vulcan could do mind melt and show you the future. I thought that was interesting.
Well, it's not the future; it's the past. So what Commodore O was really doing
what she
was
thinks might be coming, I guess, is
showing her what had happened. Like she was basically sharing with her in a mind meld what she had seen in her vision, which is why she was Zat Vash. So she basically secondhand showed Jurati the vision of what had happened and what they are afraid could happen in the future.
Right.
So it's not actually a future vision because I think that's important.
Well, if it's her vision, then it's not the past. It's her vision, right? So it's still a prediction of what she thinks is going to happen. No?
It is what she saw. So at the beginning in that 14-minute intro, they show all does not Vash touch the thing, and they all see what had happened. Like whatever this alien race left as a message, like, hey, this is what happened to us. Don't let it happen again. That's what they see. And so Commodore O is like, check out what I saw. And then Jurati saw it. And her line, which I do think you're right about touching on mental health and doing everything is important. That also kind of showed that Jurati was in the same place that all those Zat Vash had been in, or the potential Zat Vash had been at the beginning of the episode, where a lot of them did kill themselves.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Great point. Any last words about the episode, Shannon or Mike?
I think what they were able to do with this last episode, and obviously you guys are more familiar with the property than I am, but I would compare it to sort of the Marvel tone that Picard and Jurati are having this very kind of serious scene. And then you counteract that with Raffi talking with the Council of Rios, which all of those characters, obviously they're there for a purpose. But I mean, that was a very lighthearted scene, even though they're talking about some very serious things. I think that's a delicate balancing act that I think they pulled off very well.
With a nice little Scotty nod too.
Yes.
When your head of engineering's got that accent. I really also liked. I think this is one of the best. Like as far as what the heart of the show is. There's that great scene with Picard and Soji where they're sitting and talking, and Soji finally asks about Data. Yeah, and she's finally at the point where she's willing to talk about this, and she asks about Data. And Picard talks about him, and I actually wrote it down because I think it's it's such a great. They were talking about it where Soji then says, "Did Data love you, or do you think Data loved you?" And Picard says, "Data's capacity for expressing emotion was limited," and then he says, "I guess we have that in common," which I thought was really to kind of Johnny. To your point, it's sort of Picard's admission that. That is kind of one of his flaws. He's very by the book. He doesn't necessarily show emotion. The way that he loved Data as a member of his crew in Next Generation was not in a very effusive, you're my best friend way, but that he did really love Data. And then I really loved Soji at the end kind of saying, Data did love you. Like, you know, that she's sort of, it was a sign of her sort of embracing who she is, where she came from, and what she has buried deep in her positronic brain. So I thought that was a great bonding moment for the two of them.
Yeah, thoroughly agree. And I think it goes back again to the whole intro of the series of this season, which was Data and Picard playing what they were playing, and the painting and all of that is so connected.
I believe it's called poker.
Poker, yeah.
It's a future game.
I didn't remember the game they were playing, but like this whole idea of them connecting in this way, and this is the one person that I think Picard misses most of all in the entire crew, and so it's the one piece that's missing for him. So I think
he clearly doesn't miss Geordi or Worf.
Yeah, clearly. Or the contracts weren't there, one of the two. But yes, he doesn't miss Geordi or Worf. But like this idea of like Data, of course, at the beginning, if you watch those the first season episodes, Data is something they're like kind of getting used to. And it isn't until the seasons progress in the movies themselves as well that Picard develops a genuine affection for Data and vice versa. And it's no different than Spock and Kirk. I mean, Spock is the closest thing to Data as you'll get, even though he's Vulcan, and they developed a friendship. So it only makes sense in the history of Star Trek to kind of do an essence and homage to that with Data and Picard. So to see that come forward or come full circle here with Soji saying what she said, it kind of puts Picard, I think, at peace a little bit. And now we're ready to go into this next phase. And who knows if she sticks around. But either way, it feels like closure for Picard one way or another going into these next two episodes. So I'm excited about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do feel like that's true. I feel like we've sort of wrapped up. Like Jurati said she was going to turn herself in when they got to Deep Space 12. Obviously, they ended up not going there. But like we sort of get the sense that Jurati has accepted her fate. Rafi is no longer drinking. Rios has made peace with what happened with Captain Vandermeer, or at least is on that road. Picard and Soji have sort of like at least started going down that road of a relationship. Elnor has said goodbye to Hugh, sadly. 7 of 9 has sort of done her moment with the Borg. Like everyone is set up for the fact that we have 2 more big episodes, and hopefully it is just all out awesome because everyone is there, everyone's ready. So now we can just like let it fly for these last 2.
I agree. Closure helps you fight better. All right. Well, there you go. That's our review here on the Geek Buddies of episode 7 and 8, Nepenthe and Broken Pieces of this season's first season of Picard on CBS All Access. Let us know what you thought of these episodes. Let us know what you thought of our points of views and our opinions in the comments section below. Remember to subscribe to the Outlaw Nation YouTube channel where we have the Geek Buddies stuff right there, that red button down there. Please do so. Shannon, what can we tell them?
Yeah, if you'd like to follow us on social media, on Twitter, it's at @geek_buddies. On Instagram, at @the_geek_buddies. If you'd like to follow me on social media, on Twitter, it's at Shannon_McClung. On Instagram, at Shannon the Geek Buddy. If you'd like to follow Mr. Vogel, it's at MKToon. If you'd like to follow Mr. Rocha, it's at The Rocha Says.
There you go. Mikey?
Look, you don't have to hook up to a Borg cube to be part of our mini collective. All you have to do, is subscribe below. Thank you. I was proud of that one. Subscribe below if you're listening to us on Anchor or iTunes or Spotify. Go ahead and give us some comments, give us some ratings, so that we go higher up in the rankings, so that more people can check us out. Retweet us on Twitter, post us on Facebook. Tell your friends that while they are sitting at home with absolutely nothing to do, that there are literally hours and hours of geeky content for them to listen to here to pass the time while they are on quarantine. So check it out. Let's all do this together, and let's see what happens in these last 2 episodes as we engage into the season finale of Picard.
I agree. 9 and 10 coming up. Let's make it so. All right, thanks, guys. We'll talk to you next time on the
Geek Buddies. I forgot.